on-off. Then he heard Dad groaning, that horrible animal noise, and knew he was asleep. He felt the fierce sickness creeping into his stomach. Then Mum came with Kitty and they went, all three, creeping and shaking to Auntie Phil's house. That was when they called the police, who came, their blue lights flashing, and found his dad asleep at the bottom of the stairs, the knife still in his hands. A layer of dirty water sprawled across the middle of the playground. 2 dinner ladies dragged out a small boy who had been kicking and splashing as if at the seaside, and then put some red cones either side of the puddle to keep the children away. It had stopped raining, but it was grey, and the air was heavy with cold moisture. Frank watched water dripping off a gutter at one end of the school building. He was standing on the edge of the playground, his arms tightly folded and his fists clenched under his armpits. From where he stood, he could see into the infant school playground and watch Kitty as she played skipping with a group of girls. He could hear her shrieks. How could she be so happy? It was all so strange. They had only moved to a new house and come to this new school 2 weeks ago. Yet Kitty seemed quite settled. For him, it was the constant pain in his stomach, the heavy ache, like a lump which wouldn't go away, however tightly he folded his arms. And then there was this horrible stinging all over his body, and his tongue felt stiff and leathery like a cat's. All he could do was to hold himself together and keep very still. Try to disappear, didn't want to be noticed. If they looked at him, they would know that Dad was in prison. Mum had said he'd gone so that Dad could get over his drink problem, but when the social worker took him to visit that time, it seemed like a prison with the clinking of keys and all those gates and thick metal doors locking behind them, banging and echoing off the stone floors, one after the other. But nobody actually said, and he was too frightened to ask. Never asked, "Is Dad in prison?" He was the only one who seemed to understand that really all this was his fault, Dad being in prison. He shouldn't have opened that parcel, because he knew what Dad was like when he'd been drinking. He hadn't wanted to visit, but they said Dad missed him and wanted to see him, so he should go and cheer him up. He asked, "Can Kitty come too?" But Mum said she was too young. Mum kept saying things like, "And I'll tell you one thing, he's never coming back here. Never, Frankie, not setting a foot. The police won't let him anyway, so that's that. So not to worry, Frankie." But he wanted Dad to come home. He wanted him back, but he couldn't say. He was nervous, and he wet the bed the night before the visit, and they had had to stop the coach so he could go to the toilet, but his pants were already damp and he could smell himself. He didn't recognise Dad straight away. He'd shaved off his moustache, his fair hair was shorter, and he looked young. He looked nice, like when he was happy. But Frank was shy and couldn't look at him. Not really look. He wanted Kitty there, not this social worker. In the prison they had to sit the other side of the table and keep their hands on the top all the time. There were other people visiting and men in uniforms who Dad called scouts, standing at either end of the lines, watching, making sure they didn't touch each other. Dad seemed to be having a good time there, seemed to be enjoying himself. He was doing carpentry, a doll's house for Kitty, a table for home. He had wanted a multi-storey car park for his cars. But beyond anything he could think, dream of, Dad had sent him a bike for his birthday. He treasured that bike above everything. It showed Dad loved him after all. Dad thought about him. The bike and Dad seemed to go together, in a good way. Now Dad was leaning towards the social worker, smiling that smile. She was grinning too, Sonia. He hated Sonia, always interfering in their lives, and he could tell she didn't really care about them. It was just a job. He didn't want to look at Dad and Sonia, and so he watched the other visitors, the other men behind the tables, the woman further down who was crying. "I'll be home soon, son." Standing now in the dripping, unfamiliar playground, Frank wished he could have said something to Dad. Tell him that he still got top marks in maths, that he was trying hard, but there never seemed to be the right moment to say anything, and there'd not been the right moment then to say he was sorry about the parcel, that he loved him. He dreamed.